The fastest horse in Shasta County belonged to Yates Emerson, and everyone knew it was his ticket out of the gold-worn mountains of Northern California the moment he chose to ride away from everything that had ever known his name. The year was 1877, and the gold rush dreams had long since faded into the dusty reality of failing claims and abandoned hopes, leaving Weaverville a shadow of what it once promised to be. Yates had spent 3 years working the streams and ravines, saving every dollar, and now his pockets held enough to start fresh somewhere the land still held promise. His bay stallion, Thunder, could cover 60 miles in a day without breaking stride, and the open country south toward Sacramento called to him like a siren song. He had planned to leave at dawn, alone, unencumbered, free as the hawks that circled the Trinity Mountains. Then Winona Davies showed up at the livery stable with a broken wagon wheel, 2 frightened children clinging to her skirts, and desperation written across her face like a prayer nobody had answered yet. Yates was checking Thunder's shoes when he heard the wagon creak into the yard, its axle grinding wrong. One wheel canted at an angle that spoke of imminent disaster. He glanced up from beneath the brim of his hat and saw her climbing down from the driver's bench, moving with the careful precision of someone who had learned to hide pain behind practicality. She was maybe 23, same as him, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a braid that had started the day neat but had surrendered to the chaos of travel. Her dress was practical calico, faded from sun and washing, and her hands had the redness of someone who worked without complaint. "Is there a wheelwright in town?" Her voice carried the remnants of an Eastern accent, softened but not erased by Western living. "I was told there was one here." Old Marcus, who ran the livery, shook his head slowly. "Bill Hendricks was our wheelwright, died 2 months back. Heart gave out. Nobody taken up the trade since." Yates watched the hope drain from her face like water through cupped fingers. The 2 children, a boy of about 6 and a girl no more than 4, pressed closer to their mother's legs. The boy had solemn brown eyes that had seen too much for his age, and the girl clutched a rag doll with one button eye missing. "The nearest wheelwright would be in Redding," Marcus continued, scratching his gray beard. "That's 40 miles south." "But that wheel won't make it 5 miles in the condition it's in." "Can anyone repair it?" Winona asked, and Yates heard the edge of panic she was trying to suppress. "I can pay. I have some money." Marcus looked doubtful. "Most folks around here know mining, not carpentry." "You'd need someone who knows wood and metalwork both. That rim's cracked clean through, and the spokes are coming loose from the hub." Yates knew he should keep his mouth shut. He had his own plans, his own future waiting somewhere beyond these played-out mountains. Getting involved in someone else's troubles was exactly what he had promised himself he would avoid. He had watched too many good men get anchored to this dying town by obligations and sympathies, watched them defer their dreams until those dreams withered into regrets. But something about the set of her shoulders, the way she refused to let her children see her fear, made him pause. Thunder stamped impatiently in his stall, as if reading his master's thoughts and disapproving of the direction they were taking. "I can fix it," Yates heard himself say, and immediately wondered what madness had possessed him. Winona turned to look at him fully for the first time, and he noticed her eyes were gray-blue, the color of storm clouds over the mountains. "You're a wheelwright." "No, but I know wood and metal well enough. Learned from my father before he passed. It won't be pretty, but it will hold." "How long will it take?" There was something in her voice now, a thread of hope being carefully offered, afraid to trust but desperate enough to try. Yates walked over to the wagon and crouched beside the damaged wheel, running his hands over the splintered wood and bent iron. The wheel had seen hard use, probably crossing rough country, and the repair would take most of the day if he did it right. There was no guarantee it would hold for long even then. These wheels were meant for relatively smooth roads, not the mountain trails that wound through Northern California. "Where are you headed?" he asked, standing and brushing wood dust from his hands. "Red Bluff," she said. "My husband's brother has a farm there. He said we could work the land with him, have a share of the harvest." "Red Bluff is 80 miles from here," Yates said carefully. "This wheel, even if I fix it perfect, might not last that distance. The whole wagon looks like it's been rode hard." Her face tightened and he saw her swallow hard. "Then I'll pray it lasts. It's all we have." The little girl started to whimper, and Winona bent down to pick her up, settling the child on her hip with the practiced ease of motherhood. "Hush now, Lily. Everything's going to be all right." The boy, who had been silent until now, spoke up in a voice that tried to be brave. "Mama said we're going to have a real home, with chickens and everything." "That's right, Thomas," Winona said, smoothing his hair. "We're going to have a good home." Yates looked from the mother to the children to the wagon that was barely holding together, and felt his carefully laid plans beginning to crumble like the creek banks after spring runoff. "I'll fix the wheel," he said finally. "Give me until sundown." "But miss, I have to tell you straight, this wagon isn't going to make it to Red Bluff. The whole frame is weak, not just the wheel." "I don't have money for another wagon," she said quietly, and he heard the steel beneath the softness. "So this one will have to be enough." There was no point arguing with that kind of determination. Yates nodded and turned to Marcus. "I'll need tools and some oak if you've got any seasoned. Iron stock, too, for the rim." Marcus gestured toward his workshop. "Help yourself. Wood's in the back shed." As Yates headed toward the workshop, Winona called after him. "Sir, I didn't catch your name." "Yates Emerson." "I'm Winona Davies. This is Thomas and Lily." She paused, then added, "Thank you, truly." He nodded and kept walking, telling himself this was just a delay, not a derailment. He would fix the wheel. She would go her way, he would go his. And by tomorrow evening he would be halfway to Sacramento with nothing but open country ahead of him. The work took longer than he had expected. The wheel was worse off than it looked at first glance, and he had to replace 3 spokes entirely and reinforce the hub with iron bands he forged in Marcus's small furnace. The summer heat made the workshop feel like the inside of a bread oven, and sweat soaked through his shirt as he worked. Through the open door, he could see Winona sitting in the shade of an oak tree with her children, sharing out what looked like bread and cheese from a basket. She rationed it carefully, giving the larger portions to the children. Around midday, she appeared in the workshop doorway with a tin cup of water. "I thought you might need this." He accepted it gratefully, draining half the cup in one long swallow. "Thank you." She looked at the wheel, now off the wagon and supported on sawhorses as he worked. "You're good with your hands. My father was a carpenter back in Missouri. I learned from watching him." Yates set the cup down and picked up his hammer again, preparing to set a spoke. He always said a man who could work wood and metal would never go hungry. Was he right? Yates smiled faintly. "Mostly, though it doesn't help much when the gold runs out and there's no work to be had." "Is that why you're leaving?" She said it casually, but he caught the edge of something in her voice. "I saw your horse. That's not a working animal." "That's a horse for covering ground fast. Thunder can run all day without tiring," Yates admitted. "And yes, I'm heading south. There's nothing left for me here. No family. My father died 4 years ago. My mother went back east to live with her sister in Ohio. I stayed because I thought I could make something of myself in the gold fields." He brought the hammer down on the spoke, driving it firmly into the hub. "Turns out I was 3 years too late for that dream." Winona was quiet for a moment, watching him work. "Where will you go?" Sacramento first, maybe. Or further south to the San Joaquin Valley. I hear there's good farmland to be had there if a man has enough money for a down payment and the will to work it. You're a farmer, then? I'm whatever I need to be to make a living, Yates said. But yes, I grew up farming. It's in my blood, I suppose. Then you understand, she said quietly, why I have to get to Red Bluff, why this wagon has to hold together. He paused in his work and looked at her directly. Where's your husband, Mrs. Davies? Her face went still, and he saw old grief flicker across it like shadows. Died 6 months ago. Fever took him. We were working a claim up near Carville, barely making enough to eat. After he passed, there was nothing left. The claim was worthless, and I couldn't work it alone with 2 small children. My husband's brother, Samuel, wrote and said we could come to Red Bluff, that there was room for us on his farm and work to be done. She looked away, toward where her children were playing with sticks in the dirt. It's our only chance. I sold everything we had left just to buy that wagon and supplies for the journey. Yates felt something twist in his chest, a familiar ache of recognition. He had seen so many families broken by the gold country, seen so many dreams ground down into dust and desperation. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be sorry, she said, and there was that steel again. Just fix the wheel so we can keep going. He worked through the afternoon, stopping only for water and to let the forge cool enough to work the iron properly. Winona and the children stayed in the shade, and he noticed she taught them their letters by scratching in the dirt with a stick, patient even when Thomas got frustrated and Lily wandered off to chase a butterfly. She was a good mother, attentive but not hovering, firm but gentle. It spoke well of her character, he thought. A woman who could maintain standards and hope in the face of hardship was worth 10 who crumbled at the first sign of trouble. By the time the sun was dipping toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, he had the wheel repaired and back on the wagon. It was not beautiful work, rough and reinforced with more iron than was traditional, but it was solid. He spun it experimentally, checking for wobble, and satisfied himself that it would hold under normal conditions. It's done, he called, and Winona hurried over with the children in tow. She examined the wheel carefully, running her hands over his work the same way he had assessed the damage that morning. It looks strong. It should get you to Red Bluff if you go careful, Yates said, wiping his hands on a rag. Avoid ruts and rocks where you can. Don't push the mules too hard. And if you hear any cracking or grinding, stop immediately and check it. She nodded, already reaching for the small purse tied at her waist. What do I owe you? $5 should cover materials, he said, though in truth he had used more than that in iron stock alone. Marcus would bill him for it later, but the old man had a generous heart and would probably forget half the charges. Winona counted out 5 silver dollars into his hand, and he noticed how light her purse felt after. She had maybe a few more dollars left, not nearly enough for 80 miles of travel with 2 children to feed. You should stay in town tonight, Yates said, pocketing the coins. Rest the mules and start fresh in the morning. I want to cover some ground before dark, she said. Every mile now is one less tomorrow. He recognized that logic, had used it himself many times, but he also knew the mountain roads, knew how they could turn treacherous in the twilight when you could not see the holes and rocks that would shatter an axle or break a wheel. Mrs. Davies, I mean no disrespect, but you're going to risk that wheel I just fixed if you push on now. The road south is rough, and you need daylight to navigate it safely. She looked at the sky, calculating hours and distances in her head, and he could see her reluctance warring with practical sense. I don't have money for lodging. Marcus has a barn, Yates said, gesturing to the livery owner who had been watching their conversation from a respectful distance. He'll let you bed down in the hay for free if you ask politely." "It's true," Marcus confirmed, walking over. "Plenty of room, and there's a water pump out back. You and the little ones are welcome to it." Winona looked at her children, who were drooping with exhaustion now that the excitement had worn off, and made her decision. "All right, thank you, both of you." "I'll help you get the wagon settled," Yates offered, and led the way into the barn. He helped her unhitch the mules and get them fed and watered, showing Thomas how to brush them down properly while Lily watched with wide eyes. The boy was eager to help, and Yates found himself explaining things patiently, the way his own father had done for him. It stirred old memories, both sweet and painful. When the animals were tended and the wagon secured, Winona spread blankets in a clean corner of the barn and settled her children for the night. She had some dried meat and hardtack in her supplies, and she shared it out carefully. Yates noticed she gave most of her portion to the children and ate little herself. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, which was not an answer. He went to the small general store that stayed open late and bought bread, cheese, and apples with some of the money she had paid him. When he returned to the barn, she looked at him with surprise and something else he could not quite name. "You didn't have to do this. Consider it part of the service," he said, setting the food down. "Can't have my wheel fail because the driver fainted from hunger." She smiled at that, a real smile that transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "You're a kind man, Mr. Emerson." "Yates," he corrected, "and I'm just practical." They shared the food, and the children perked up at the fresh bread and sweet apples. Thomas chattered about the mules and everything Yates had taught him, and Lily showed off her rag doll and explained very seriously that her name was Penelope, and she was a princess from a faraway land. "A princess needs a proper kingdom," Yates said gravely, earning a delighted giggle from the little girl. "When we get to Uncle Samuel's farm, Penelope is going to have a room in the biggest barn," Lily declared. "That sounds like a fine kingdom," Yates agreed. As the children ate and talked, he found himself watching Winona, noticing the way she relaxed slightly when her children were happy. The way her hands moved with efficient grace as she cut apple slices and distributed them fairly. She caught him looking once and raised an eyebrow in silent question, but he just shook his head and looked away. After the meal, the children settled down quickly, worn out by the long day. Winona sang them a soft lullaby, something about stars and sailing ships, and her voice was surprisingly lovely, clear, and true. Yates listened from where he sat near the barn door, ostensibly keeping watch but really just reluctant to leave. When the children were asleep, Winona came to sit near him, keeping her voice low. "You didn't tell me you were leaving tomorrow. How did you know? Your saddlebags are already packed. I saw them on your horse, and you have that look." "What look?" "The look of someone ready to run." She said it without judgment, just observation. "I've seen it before. My husband had it sometimes before Lily was born. That restless need to be somewhere else, anywhere else." Yates was quiet for a moment, listening to the night sounds of the town, the distant laughter from the saloon, the yipping of coyotes in the hills. "This place is dying. There's no future here." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm leaving too. You're going to family, that's different. You have a destination, a purpose." "And you don't," he shrugged. "I have a direction, south, but no real destination, just away from here." She was quiet, and he thought maybe he had offended her somehow, but when he glanced over, she was just looking thoughtful. "It must be nice," she said finally, "to be that free, to be able to just ride away from everything. You make it sound like a blessing. Sometimes it feels more like a curse." "How so?" "When you can go anywhere, it means you don't belong anywhere." He surprised himself with the honesty. "At least you know where you're going. You know who's waiting for you. I'm just chasing the horizon." "Maybe the horizon is where you're meant to be," Winona said softly. "Maybe some people are built for the chasing." "Maybe," he agreed, though the words felt hollow. They sat in companionable silence for a while, and Yates tried to remember the last time he had just talked with someone like this, easy and honest without posturing or pretense. It had been a long time, too long. "I should let you rest," he said finally, rising to his feet. "You have a long road tomorrow." "So do you," she said, standing as well. "Thank you again, Yates, for everything." "Safe travels, Mrs. Davies." "Winona," she corrected, echoing his earlier words, "and may your horizon treat you kindly." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and walked out into the night, heading toward the boarding house where he had a room paid through the end of the week. Tomorrow he would be gone, and this would all be just another memory, another brief intersection of lives moving in different directions. Except he could not stop thinking about her eyes, storm cloud gray, and the way she had smiled when her children laughed. He told himself it was nothing, just the natural response to meeting someone decent in a world that often felt short on decency. By tomorrow it would fade, and he would be back to his original plan, thunder eating up the miles and freedom stretching endlessly ahead. That was what he told himself as he lay in bed, listening to the sounds of Weaverville at night. But sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, his dreams were full of gray-blue eyes and soft lullabies. Yates woke before dawn, as he always did, and dressed quickly in the darkness. He had his bags packed and ready, everything he owned in the world condensed down to what would fit in 2 saddlebags and a bedroll. It was a sparse existence, but it was mobile, and that had been the goal for months now. He ate a quick breakfast at the boarding house, settled his account with the landlady, and headed to the livery stable as the first light was breaking over the mountains. Thunder nickered a greeting when he entered, eager for the day's run. Yates saddled him with practiced efficiency, checking the girth and bridle carefully. The horse was worth everything he had paid for him and more, strong and smart with stamina that seemed endless. He was leading Thunder out of the stall when he noticed Winona and the children were already up, packing their wagon. Thomas was helping his mother lift bags into the back while Lily sat on the driver's bench, talking to her doll. "Early start," Yates commented, walking Thunder over. Winona looked up, and he noticed the dark circles under her eyes that suggested her sleep had been no better than his. "Like you said, the road is rough. I want all the daylight I can get." He nodded, understanding the logic even as something in his chest tightened. This was goodbye then. 2 people who had intersected briefly, helped each other in passing, and now would diverge and never meet again. It was the way of the world, especially in the West where everyone was coming from somewhere or going to somewhere, rarely staying put long enough to lay down roots. "Safe travels," he said, preparing to mount. "You too." She paused in her work, wiping her hands on her apron. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Yates. I hope the farm is everything you need." Thomas came running over, excited. "Are you riding out too, Mr. Emerson?" "Your horse is so fast. Mama says he could probably beat anything." "He's pretty fast," Yates agreed, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. "I wish I could ride a horse like that someday," Thomas said wistfully. "Maybe you will. Your uncle probably has horses on his farm. You can learn there." The boy's face lit up at the thought, and Yates felt that twist in his chest again. He swung up into the saddle, settling his weight and gathering the reins. Thunder danced sideways, ready to run, feeling his master's mood and responding to it. "Goodbye," Lily called from the wagon, waving energetically. "Goodbye, Mr. Horseman," he waved back, touched by the nickname, and turned Thunder toward the south road. This was it. Time to go. Time to start the life he had been planning for months. Thunder took 3 steps before Yates pulled him to a halt. He sat there for a long moment, fighting with himself, common sense warring with something deeper and less rational. The smart thing, the sensible thing, was to keep riding. Winona Davies and her children were not his responsibility. He had done his good deed, fixed the wheel, and now they each had their own paths to follow. Getting more involved would only complicate things, would delay his plans, would anchor him to obligations he had no business taking on. But he kept thinking about that wheel, how even his best work might not hold for 80 miles of rough mountain roads. Kept thinking about what would happen if it failed in some lonely stretch between towns, with 2 small children and a woman alone. Kept thinking about how light her purse had felt, how she had given most of her food to her children, how she had thanked him with such genuine gratitude for the smallest kindness. Kept thinking about gray-blue eyes and quiet determination. "Damn it all," he muttered and turned Thunder back toward the wagon. Winona looked up in surprise as he approached. "Did you forget something? The road to Red Bluff," he said before he could talk himself out of it. "It goes through some lonely country, rough terrain. If that wheel fails, you'll be stranded." "I'll manage," she said, but he heard the uncertainty beneath the bravado. "I'm sure you would," he agreed. "But you don't have to. I'm heading south anyway. I could ride along at least until you're past the worst of the mountain roads. Just to make sure the wagon holds together." She stared at him, and he saw the war playing out on her face between pride and practicality, between not wanting to be a burden and the deep relief of not being alone. "You said you were going to Sacramento. Red Bluff is not on the way." "It's not far off the way," he lied, "and my schedule is flexible. I can't pay you. I'm not asking for payment. I'm just offering to ride along for a few days." He tried to keep his voice casual, as if this was no great thing, when in truth it represented the complete derailment of every plan he had made. "Call it insurance on my repair work. I have professional pride." A slow smile spread across her face, genuine and warm, and he felt something in his chest shift and settle, like a key turning in a lock he had not known was there. Professional pride, absolutely. Can't have people saying Yates Emerson builds wheels that fail. "Well, we wouldn't want that," she said, and the relief in her voice made his decision feel less like madness and more like the only choice he could have made. "Then it's settled. I'll ride escort until we're past the mountains." Thomas let out a whoop of excitement. "Mama, Mr. Emerson is coming with us. Can I ride his horse, just a little?" "No, you may not," Winona said firmly, but she was still smiling. "Mr. Emerson's horse is not a toy." "Maybe later I can give you a short ride," Yates offered, and the boy's eyes went wide with joy. They set out as the sun cleared the mountains, Winona driving the wagon with Lily beside her and Thomas in the back, Yates ranging ahead on Thunder to scout the road. The horse was clearly disappointed not to be running flat out across open country, but he settled into the slower pace with resigned grace, understanding somehow that plans had changed. The road south from Weaverville wound through heavily forested mountains, following creeks and ridgelines, occasionally dipping through valleys where small ranches and mining claims clung to the land. It was beautiful country, green and wild, but the road was as rough as Yates had warned. Deep ruts from winter rains, rocks pushed up from the soil, fallen branches, and washouts made the going slow and treacherous. Yates rode ahead, clearing obstacles where he could and warning Winona about the worst spots. When they came to a particularly bad stretch of rutted road, he dismounted and led Thunder, walking beside the wagon to watch how the repaired wheel handled the strain. It held up well, his reinforcements doing their job, but he could hear the stress in the wood and knew it was being tested hard. Around midday, they stopped to rest the mules and eat lunch in the shade of a massive ponderosa pine. Winona brought out more hardtack and dried meat, and Yates contributed some jerky and canned peaches he had in his supplies. The children devoured the sweet peaches with delight, and even Winona allowed herself a full portion. "How far did we come?" she asked, sitting on a fallen log while the children played nearby. "Maybe 8 miles, Yates said, mentally calculating the pace. "The road gets better once we drop down out of the high country, but we've got another day of mountains at least." 8 miles, she repeated, and he heard the discouragement in her voice. At this rate, the journey to Red Bluff would take 10 days or more, and he knew her supplies were not planned for that length of travel. "We're doing fine," he said. "First day is always the hardest, getting the rhythm figured out." "You don't have to sugar-coat it for me," she said, meeting his eyes. "I know we're moving slower than we should. I know the supplies won't last at this rate. I can do math." He respected her directness. "All right, then here's the truth. Yes, we're moving slower than ideal. But the wagon is holding up, the mules are strong, and once we get out of the mountains, we can make better time. As for supplies, I've got enough to share, and there are towns along the way where we can resupply if needed. I told you I can't pay you. And I told you I'm not asking for payment." He kept his voice level, patient. "Look, Mrs. Davies, Winona, I made the choice to ride along. That makes this my decision and my responsibility. You're not obligated to me for anything. If you want me to ride on ahead and leave you to it, say the word and I'll go. But if you're willing to accept some help from someone who's offering it freely, then let's not argue about payment and debt and obligation. Let's just focus on getting you and those children safely to Red Bluff." She studied him for a long moment, her gray-blue eyes searching his face as if trying to understand what motivated him. He let her look, having no good answer himself for why he had abandoned his plans to escort a widow and her children through the mountains. "All right," she said finally. "And thank you, truly. You're welcome, truly." That evening they made camp near a creek, pulling the wagon into a clearing where the grass was good for the mules. Yates showed Thomas how to hobble the animals properly and let them graze, while Winona prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon over a fire. The children were tired but happy, excited by the adventure of camping under the stars. After supper, while Winona cleaned up, Yates gave Thomas the promised ride on Thunder. He swung the boy up into the saddle and led the horse in gentle circles around the camp, ignoring Thunder's offended snorting at being reduced to a child's carousel pony. "He's so tall," Thomas exclaimed, gripping the saddle horn with both hands. "I can see everything." "That's the idea," Yates said. "On a horse like this you can see trouble coming from far off. Have you been in a lot of trouble?" "Some. Mostly I've been smart enough to avoid it. My papa used to say that being smart was better than being strong." "Your papa was right, though being both doesn't hurt." When Thomas had his fill of riding, Yates lifted him down and Lily immediately demanded her turn. He obliged, walking Thunder even more slowly for the smaller child, who shrieked with delight and waved at her mother like she was in a parade. Watching from the fire, Winona smiled. "You're good with them." "They're good kids," Yates replied, focusing on keeping Thunder steady. "You've raised them well. They've had a hard time of it these past months, losing their father, leaving the only home they knew. This trip has been frightening for them, though they try to be brave. They get that from you, I think, the bravery or the stubbornness." She poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. "My mother always said I was too stubborn for my own good, that I should have married the banker's son back in Pennsylvania instead of running off west with a dreamer who chased gold. You regret it?" "Marrying James," No, he was a good man, a loving husband and father. The gold never mattered to him as much as I thought it did. He just wanted to give us a better life." She was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. "I regret that he died believing he had failed us. That was the worst part, watching him slip away knowing he thought he hadn't provided enough." "But he had," Yates said quietly. "He gave you those 2 children and he clearly taught them well before he passed. That's not failure." She looked up at him, and even in the firelight he could see the shine of tears in her eyes. "Thank you for saying that." He just nodded, uncomfortable with the depth of emotion in the moment, and turned his attention back to Lily, who was now pretending thunder was a dragon and she was a knight on a quest. That night, after the children were asleep in the wagon, Yates and Winona sat by the dying fire, both wrapped in blankets against the mountain chill. The stars overhead were brilliant, undiminished by city lights, and the creek made a constant murmuring background to the night. "Tell me about Missouri," Winona said. "What was it like growing up there?" "Green," he said immediately. Everything was green, especially in spring. Rolling hills and forests and fields that seemed to go on forever. "My father had a good farm, 40 acres of bottom land that grew corn tall as a man's chest. We had a house with real glass windows and a root cellar that stayed cool even in August." "It sounds beautiful. Why did you leave?" "My father died. A tree fell on him while he was clearing timber. He lingered for 3 days, but there was nothing to be done. After he passed, my mother couldn't run the farm alone, and I was 17, stubborn and full of dreams about the goldfields. I convinced her to sell, and we split the money. She went back east, and I came west." "Do you ever wish you had stayed?" "Sometimes. Mostly I wish I had understood what I was giving up. Land matters, roots matter in ways I didn't appreciate until I didn't have them anymore." "Is that why you want to farm again? To get back what you lost?" He considered the question seriously. "Maybe. Or maybe I just finally understand what my father was trying to teach me. That a man needs something to build on, something that's his and his alone. You can't build a life chasing gold and dreams. You need solid ground under your feet." "Then I hope you find it," Winona said. "The solid ground. I hope you find what you're looking for too," he replied. "Peace maybe, security for your children." "That would be enough," she agreed. "More than enough." They talked into the night, sharing stories and histories, and Yates was struck by how easy it was to talk to her, how she listened with genuine interest and responded with thoughtful observations. She was intelligent and well-spoken despite the hardships of her life, and she had a quiet sense of humor that emerged once she relaxed. When they finally banked the fire and retired to sleep, Yates in his bedroll under the stars and Winona in the wagon with her children, he lay awake for a long time, staring up at the vast sweep of the Milky Way and wondering what he was doing. This was not the plan. This was not the freedom he had been chasing. And yet, somehow, it felt more right than anything had in a long time. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. They rose with the sun, traveled slowly through the mountainous terrain, stopped for midday rest, and made camp before dusk. The miles accumulated gradually, the wagon holding up better than Yates had dared hope, though he inspected the repaired wheel every evening and tightened bolts and reinforcements where needed. The children grew more comfortable with him, Thomas following him around camp like a shadow, asking endless questions about horses and camping and the West. Lily adopted him as an honorary uncle, insisting he admire Penelope the doll's various outfits and adventures. Winona relaxed more each day, laughing more easily, sharing more of herself. And Yates found himself less and less interested in riding ahead to scout and more content to ride beside the wagon, talking with Winona while the children played in the back or pointing out hawks and deer to them when they appeared. On the fourth day, they descended out of the high mountains into the foothills, and the road improved dramatically. They made 15 miles that day, and Winona's spirits lifted visibly with the progress. "At this rate, we'll reach Red Bluff in 4 more days," she said that evening, sounding almost surprised. "Maybe 3 if the road stays this good," Yates agreed. He was checking the wagon wheel by lamplight, running his hands over the wood and metal, feeling for stress points. Everything still felt solid, his repair work holding up to the journey. "You must be eager to get back to your own plans," Winona said, watching him work. "I've taken up nearly a week of your time." He had been expecting this conversation, had been preparing for it, but now that it arrived, he found himself reluctant to engage with it. "The time's been well spent. Even so, you had your own destination. Sacramento, wasn't it? You could ride on ahead from here. The road is good now, and we're past the worst terrain. The wheel should hold the rest of the way." She was giving him an out, he realized, releasing him from any obligation he might feel. It was generous and thoughtful, and it made his chest ache in a way he could not quite name. "I could," he agreed slowly, standing and wiping his hands. "Or I could continue on to Red Bluff, make sure you get there safely." "Yates, you've already done more than anyone could ask. You don't owe us anything more." "I know I don't owe you. That's not why I'm suggesting it." She looked at him steadily, and he saw understanding dawn in her eyes. "Then, why are you suggesting it?" He should have had an answer prepared, some casual reason that did not expose the truth of what he was feeling. But he found he could not lie to her, could not diminish what had been growing between them with false casualness. "Because I'm not ready to say goodbye yet," he said simply. "If you'll have me, I'd like to see this through to the end." Her expression softened, and something warm and hopeful flickered in her eyes. "I'd like that too. All right then. Red Bluff it is." They stood there in the lamplight, the night sounds of the foothills around them, and something passed between them that felt like a promise neither was quite ready to speak aloud. The next 3 days were golden, in Yates's memory afterward. The weather stayed clear and warm, the road remained good, and the wagon rolled steadily southward without incident. They passed through small settlements and trading posts, saw other travelers on the road, and each mile brought them closer to journey's end. But Yates found his eagerness for that end diminishing with each passing day. He began to dread the moment when they would arrive in Red Bluff, when Winona and the children would be reunited with her brother-in-law, when there would be no more reason for him to stay. He knew he should be planning his next move, figuring out where he would go from Red Bluff. But instead, he found himself living entirely in the present, savoring each conversation with Winona, each moment with the children. On the 6th evening out from Weaverville, they camped beside a small lake that reflected the sunset in shades of gold and pink. After supper, while the children played at the water's edge under their mother's watchful eye, Yates sat on a log and tried to sort through the tangle of his feelings. This was not what he had wanted. He had wanted freedom, open country, the ability to go where he pleased when he pleased. He had wanted to be unburdened by obligations and attachments. And yet here he was, more tangled up in other people's lives than he had been in years, and the strangest part was that he did not resent it. Instead, he felt something he had not experienced in a long time: contentment. Winona came to sit beside him, having left the children with strict instructions not to go beyond the shallows. "You look thoughtful." "Just planning ahead," he lied. "Where will you go, after Red Bluff?" It was the question he had been avoiding. "Not sure yet. I'll decide when I get there." "You could come to the farm," she said quietly. "Samuel always needs help, especially during harvest season. He wouldn't be able to pay much, but room and board would be included. Yates looked at her sharply, trying to read her expression in the fading light. "Is that what you want?" She met his gaze directly. "I'm saying there's a place for you if you want it. The children have grown fond of you, and I—" She paused, seemed to gather her courage. "I've enjoyed your company more than I expected to." His heart was hammering in his chest now, and he knew they were approaching something significant, something that could not be taken back once spoken. "Winona, I need you to understand something. When I left Weaverville, I was planning to start over somewhere new, build something for myself. I wasn't looking for complications. Is that what this is to you? A complication?" "No," he said, more forcefully than he intended. "That's the problem. It's not a complication. It's becoming the thing I want most, and that scares the hell out of me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be part of something, part of a family, without losing myself in the process." She reached out and took his hand, and the simple contact sent electricity through him. "You don't lose yourself. You find more of yourself than you knew was there. That's what family is, Yates. Not losing, but gaining. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and messy, but it's also the most worthwhile thing in the world." She squeezed his hand gently. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just telling you that you have options. You don't have to keep running if you don't want to." He looked at their joined hands, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. "When did this happen?" he asked quietly. "When did I stop thinking about leaving and start thinking about staying?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Somewhere between Weaverville and here. Somewhere in all the conversations and shared meals and evenings by the fire. It happened so gradually I didn't notice until it had already changed everything." "Are you saying—" He stopped, not sure how to phrase the question, not sure he was ready for the answer. "I'm saying I care about you," Winona said, her voice steady despite the vulnerability of the admission. "More than I thought I could care about anyone again so soon after James. I'm saying the thought of you riding away after Red Bluff makes me ache in a way I wasn't prepared for. And I'm saying if there's any chance you might feel the same way, I'd like to explore what that means." Yates turned to face her fully, still holding her hand, and looked into those gray-blue eyes that had haunted his thoughts since the moment he first saw them. "I feel the same way," he said, the words feeling momentous and right. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along this road I stopped planning my future and started hoping it might include you." Her smile was like sunrise, gradual and transforming. "Then stay. Come to the farm, work with Samuel, and let's see where this goes. No promises, no obligations beyond taking things one day at a time. Just stay." "I'll stay," he said, and felt the words settle into his bones like a vow. "For as long as you'll have me, I'll stay." She leaned forward and kissed him, gentle and tentative, and he responded carefully, aware of the enormity of the moment. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, and the future that had seemed so uncertain an hour ago now glowed with possibility. Mama kissed Mr. Horseman. Lily's delighted shriek shattered the intimate moment, and they broke apart to find both children staring at them with wide eyes and enormous grins. "Lily Davies, you mind your own business," Winona said, but she was laughing, her cheeks flushed. "Are you going to marry him?" Thomas asked with all the blunt curiosity of a 6-year-old. "That's quite enough questions from you," Winona said firmly, but Yates noticed she did not actually answer, and neither of them let go of each other's hands. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat by the fire again, this time side by side, Winona leaning against his shoulder. They talked about the future now, tentatively exploring what it might look like. Winona told him about Samuel's farm, what she knew of it from letters, the plans for expansion and development. Yates talked about his farming experience, what he could contribute, how he might build a place for himself there. "I won't come to the farm as charity," he said firmly. "I'll work, earn my keep, pay my own way." "No one's suggesting otherwise," Winona assured him. "Samuel will be grateful for another strong back and someone who knows farming. You'll more than earn your place." "And us?" he asked quietly. "How do we handle this with your brother-in-law?" "I don't want him thinking I'm taking advantage of your situation. Samuel is a good man. He'll see what's between us for what it is, something real and honest that developed naturally, and if he has concerns, we'll address them openly." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Unless you're worried about what people might think." "I'm worried about you," he corrected. "About your reputation, about making things harder for you." "My reputation survived being a widow with 2 children traveling alone across Northern California. I think it can handle me having found a good man along the way." She said it with such conviction that he had to smile. "A good man. The best I've met in a very long time," she confirmed. "Possibly ever if I'm being honest. That's a high bar. You've cleared it with room to spare." They kissed again, longer this time, deeper, and when they finally pulled apart, Yates felt like his entire world had realigned around this woman and these children, around the possibility of a future he had not even known he wanted until it appeared before him. They reached Red Bluff on the 7th day, rolling into town in late afternoon with the sun slanting golden across the Sacramento River Valley. The town was larger than Weaverville, bustling with activity, a river port and farming center that still thrived even as the gold rush faded into memory. Samuel Davies's farm was 3 miles outside of town, and they followed the directions from his letters, turning onto a road that led through fields of wheat and pastures dotted with cattle. The farmhouse, when it came into view, was a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and a barn that spoke of prosperity and careful maintenance. A tall man came out of the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on his work pants. He was perhaps 35, with James Davies's build and coloring, and when he saw the wagon, his face broke into a wide smile. "Winona," he hurried forward as she pulled the wagon to a stop. "You made it. I was starting to worry." She climbed down from the wagon and accepted his embrace, and Yates watched the reunion with a mixture of happiness for her and uncertainty about his own place in this scene. "Uncle Samuel." Thomas and Lily tumbled out of the wagon and threw themselves at their uncle, who laughed and scooped them both up. "Look at you two. You've grown a foot since I last saw you." He set them down and turned to help Winona, then noticed Yates for the first time. "And you are?" "Yates Emerson," Yates said, dismounting and offering his hand. "I rode escort for your sister-in-law from Weaverville. The mountain roads can be rough for a wagon alone." Samuel shook his hand with a firm grip, his eyes assessing but not unfriendly. "Samuel Davies, that was good of you." "The family's grateful." "Yates did more than escort us," Winona said, coming to stand beside Yates in a way that made her position clear. "He repaired our wagon wheel when it broke in Weaverville, and he's been watching over us the whole journey. I don't know that we would have made it without him." Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly, and Yates saw him taking in the way Winona stood close to him, the comfortable familiarity between them. "Then we owe you more than thanks. Will you stay for supper at least? It's the least we can offer." "If it's not an imposition," Yates said carefully. "No imposition at all. Any friend of Winona's is welcome here." Samuel's tone was warm, but Yates caught the unspoken questions in his eyes. A woman emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 30, pretty in a wholesome way, with brown hair and kind eyes. "Is this Winona?" "Oh, Samuel, why didn't you call me?" "Margaret, my wife," Samuel said, making introductions. "Margaret, this is my sister-in-law Winona and her children Thomas and Lily, and this is Yates Emerson, who's been helping them on the road." Margaret's welcome was immediately warm and genuine, embracing Winona like they were already family and exclaiming over the children. She insisted everyone come inside immediately, that supper would be ready soon, and that there was plenty of room for everyone. Over the meal, the full story came out. Winona explained about the wagon wheel breaking, about Yates's repair, about how he had offered to escort them despite his own plans. Margaret kept exchanging meaningful glances with her husband, clearly recognizing what was developing even if the principals had not fully articulated it yet. "So where were you headed originally, Mr. Emerson?" Samuel asked as they finished the meal. "Winona mentioned you had your own plans." "I was going south, looking for farmland to buy," Yates said honestly. "I'd been mining near Weaverville, but the gold was playing out. I grew up farming in Missouri, and I wanted to get back to it." "There's good land to be had in the San Joaquin Valley," Samuel said, "though it takes capital to start from nothing." "I have some saved," Yates said. "Not enough for a large spread, but enough to start small and build up." Samuel nodded, considering. "That's the right approach. Start with what you can manage and expand carefully." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Emerson. I need help on this farm. It's more than Margaret and I can manage alone, especially now that she's expecting our first child. I was hoping Winona and the children would help ease the burden, but another man who knows farming would be welcome indeed. The work is hard, but fair, and I pay decent wages. Room and board included, naturally." Yates glanced at Winona, who was watching him with barely concealed hope. "I appreciate the offer. I'd be happy to help out." "Then it's settled," Samuel said, reaching across the table to shake hands. "We can work out the details of pay and such tomorrow. For tonight, let's just be glad everyone arrived safely." After supper, while Margaret showed Winona and the children to the rooms that would be theirs, Samuel drew Yates aside on the porch. The evening was warm and pleasant, the smell of hay and growing things thick in the air. "I'll speak plainly," Samuel said, his tone friendly but serious. "I can see something's developing between you and Winona. I won't pretend I'm not concerned. She's family, she's vulnerable after losing James, and she has 2 children to think about." "I understand your concern," Yates said, respecting the directness. "I'll speak plainly too. I care about her more than I expected to. And I care about those children. I'm not looking to take advantage of anyone's situation. I just want a chance to build something good, something lasting, and if that includes Winona and her children, then I'll count myself the luckiest man alive." Samuel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. James was a good man, but he was a dreamer. Chased gold when he should have been building something solid. It broke Winona's heart watching him fail, watching him die thinking he'd let his family down. "She needs someone steady now, someone reliable. Can you be that?" "I can," Yates said with conviction. "I've done my chasing. I'm ready to build now." "All right then. We'll see how things go, but Yates, if you hurt her or those children, you'll answer to me. Family matters more than anything else in this world, and I take care of my own." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Yates said, and meant it. They shook hands again, and the understanding between them felt solid, man to man, built on respect and shared values. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt right from the start. Yates threw himself into the farm work with the enthusiasm of someone who had finally found his place. He rose before dawn to help Samuel with the animals, spent his days in the fields or repairing equipment, and worked until sunset. It was hard labor, but it was honest and productive, and he went to bed each night with the satisfaction of having built something, having contributed something meaningful. Winona worked alongside Margaret in the house and garden, caring for the children while also helping with the endless tasks of running a farm household. But she made time each day to find Yates, bringing him water in the fields or joining him for evening walks after the children were asleep. Their relationship deepened gradually, built on conversation and shared values and the quiet comfort of simply being together. Thomas followed Yates everywhere when allowed, soaking up everything he could learn about horses and farming and being a man in the world. Yates taught him patiently, remembering his own father's lessons, and felt something heal in himself each time the boy's face lit up with understanding or accomplishment. Lily adopted Yates completely, declaring him to be Penelope's favorite person and insisting he be included in all the doll's adventures. He endured tea parties with solemn grace and always admired whatever outfit Penelope was wearing, earning Lily's absolute devotion. A month after their arrival, Samuel approached Yates in the barn as he was grooming Thunder. "You've been good to your word," Samuel said without preamble. "You work hard, you're reliable, and you've been good for this farm. More than that, you've been good for Winona and the children. Margaret and I have talked about it, and we'd like to offer you something more permanent." "I'm listening," Yates said, setting down the curry comb. "I've been thinking about expanding the farm, buying the adjoining property to the east. It's 40 acres, good bottom land, with a small house that needs work but is sound. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price, but it's more than I can manage alone." Samuel paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "What if we went into partnership? You put up what capital you have, I'll put up the rest, and we work the land together. After 5 years, if things go as planned, we split the property. You'd own 20 acres outright, enough to build your own place on." Yates felt his breath catch. "That's generous." "It's practical," Samuel corrected. "I need the help, and I'd rather have a partner I trust than hire hands who might move on when better opportunities arise. And if things with Winona continue in the direction they seem to be heading, well, it's good to keep family close." "I'd need to think about it," Yates said, though his heart was already leaping at the possibility. "Of course. Talk to Winona, figure out what you want your future to look like. The offer stands whenever you're ready." That evening, Yates and Winona walked down to the creek that bordered the farm, the late summer sunset painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He told her about Samuel's offer, and she listened with growing excitement. 20 acres, she breathed. "That's enough to build a real home, a real future." "It would take 5 years of hard work," Yates cautioned. "No guarantees it would all pan out." "Nothing in life is guaranteed," Winona countered. "But this is a real opportunity, something solid to build on. Isn't that what you said you wanted?" "It is," he admitted. "But Winona, before I accept, I need to know something. Where do you see this going, us? Because if I'm going to put down roots here, tie my future to this place, I need to know if there's a chance your future might include me." She turned to face him fully, the sunset gilding her hair and making her eyes shine. "I love you, Yates Emerson. I didn't think I could love anyone again after James, didn't think my heart had room for it. But you've proven me wrong in the best possible way. You've been patient and kind and steady, everything I needed without knowing I needed it. So yes, my future includes you if you want it to." He kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into it, all the hope and love and gratitude for this woman who had changed the course of his life. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "Then I want it," he said firmly. "All of it. The partnership with Samuel, the land, building a life here. But most of all, I want you and those children. I want to be the father Thomas and Lily deserve, and I want to be the husband you deserve. Will you marry me, Winona, Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling wider than he had ever seen. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Red Bluff, with Samuel and Margaret standing up for them, and Thomas and Lily serving as the world's most enthusiastic witnesses. Winona wore a simple dress of blue cotton that matched her eyes, and Yates wore his best suit, brushed and pressed until it looked almost new. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas cheered so loudly that everyone laughed. The reception was held at the farm, with neighbors from miles around coming to celebrate. There was food and music and dancing, and Yates danced with his new wife until his feet ached, not caring about anything except the joy in her face. Later that night, alone finally in the small room that was now theirs, Winona came into his arms with a sigh of contentment. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For choosing the slow wagon, for choosing us. You could have ridden away on that fast horse of yours and had your freedom and your open country. Instead, you chose this, chose to stay, and I'll be grateful for that choice every day of my life." He tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "It wasn't a sacrifice, Winona. It was the easiest decision I ever made. That fast horse and open country would have been empty without you. What we have here, this is freedom. Real freedom, the kind that comes from choosing exactly where you want to be and who you want to be with." "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always will." They kissed, and the future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility, built on the solid ground of love and commitment and shared dreams. The partnership with Samuel proved to be everything Yates had hoped. They purchased the adjacent property in early autumn, and Yates split his time between working his own land and helping with the main farm. The small house on the new property needed extensive repairs, but Yates threw himself into the work with enthusiasm, rebuilding it board by board until it was sound and comfortable. Winona worked beside him when she could, helping with the repairs and planning how they would arrange their new home. Thomas and Lily explored every inch of their new property, claiming favorite trees and naming the creek that ran through it. They were happy in a way they had not been since before their father died, secure and loved and excited about the future. The first winter was hard, as first winters always are, but they weathered it together. Yates learned the patterns of the land, where water collected and where it drained, which fields were best for wheat and which for hay. He built a small barn for Thunder and the other animals they acquired, constructed fences, cleared brush, and slowly transformed the raw land into something productive. In spring, they planted their first crop, and Yates felt the deep satisfaction of putting seeds into soil he would own someday, soil that would support his family. Winona planted a garden near the house, and it flourished under her care, providing vegetables for their table and preserves for the winter. Thomas turned 7 that spring and took on more responsibilities around the farm, eager to prove himself useful. Yates taught him to handle tools and care for animals, and watched with pride as the boy grew in skill and confidence. Lily turned 5 and started learning her letters in earnest, studying with her mother each morning before helping with the easier farm chores. That summer, Winona told Yates she was expecting their first child together. He was overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, hardly able to believe this blessing after everything that had led them to this point. She glowed with happiness, and he found himself constantly amazed that this was his life now, that these people were his family. Their son was born the following March, a healthy baby with Yates's dark hair and Winona's gray-blue eyes. They named him James, after Winona's first husband, and when Yates held his son for the first time, He understood finally and completely what his father had been trying to teach him all those years ago about the importance of roots and family, and building something that mattered. Thomas and Lily doted on their baby brother, gentle and careful with him, eager to help in any way they could. Watching them together, Yates felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost frightened him. These were his children now, all three of them, and he would move mountains to keep them safe and happy. The years flowed by, marked by the rhythms of farming and family. They weathered droughts and good harvests, celebrated birthdays and holidays, built friendships with neighbors, and slowly became part of the fabric of the community. Samuel and Margaret had 3 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, running wild across both properties, building forts and catching frogs and living the kind of childhood that would become treasured memories. In the 5th year, as promised, Samuel and Yates split the property formally. Yates now owned 20 acres outright, with a solid house, a good barn, cleared fields, and a herd of cattle that was slowly growing. It was not a large operation, but it was his, built with his own hands and sweat, and the pride he felt was immeasurable. "Your father would be proud," Winona said one evening as they stood on their porch, watching the sunset paint their fields in gold. James, now 3, was playing at their feet, and she was pregnant again with their second child together. "I hope so," Yates said, pulling her close. "I finally understand what he was trying to teach me. About how a man's worth isn't measured in gold or freedom or adventure, but in what he builds and who he builds it with." "You've built something wonderful," she said, leaning into him. "A home, a family, a future. Everything we dreamed of and more." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I almost missed it all. If that wagon wheel hadn't broken in Weaverville, if I'd ridden on like I planned, I would have lost everything that matters." "But you didn't ride on," she reminded him. "You stopped. You helped. You chose to stay. That's what makes you the man you are, Yates. You could have had your fast horse and open country, but you chose the slow wagon and us instead. You chose love over freedom, and that's the bravest thing anyone can do." "It wasn't brave," he corrected gently. "It was just recognizing the truth when it appeared in front of me. You were the truth, Winona. You and these children. Everything else was just me running from what I was afraid to want." Their daughter was born that autumn, a tiny thing with her mother's blonde hair and a temper that showed from day one. They named her Rose, and she fit into their family as if she had always been meant to be there. Thomas, now 11, was protective of both his younger siblings. Lily, at 9, was already helping her mother with the household and had declared she would be a teacher someday. James toddled around getting into everything, fearless and curious. More years passed, each one adding depth and richness to the life they had built. The farm prospered through hard work and careful management. Yates and Samuel's partnership proved to be strong, based on mutual respect and compatible working styles. Margaret and Winona became true sisters, supporting each other through the challenges of farm life and raising children. When Thomas turned 15, he told Yates he wanted to be a farmer like him, wanted to work the land and build something lasting. Yates felt his heart nearly burst with pride and spent the next years teaching his oldest son everything he knew, watching him grow from boy to man, capable and responsible and good. Lily did indeed become a teacher, moving to Red Bluff to teach school but coming home every weekend to help on the farm and fill the house with stories and laughter. She had her mother's intelligence and her stepfather's steady reliability, and Yates knew she would do great things. James grew into a boy who loved horses above all else, spending hours with Thunder, who was aging now but still proud and strong. Yates taught him to ride, remembering his own father's lessons, and felt the circle completing itself, one generation teaching the next. Rose was stubborn and fierce, afraid of nothing, determined to keep up with her older siblings in everything. She adored her father absolutely and followed him around the farm, asking endless questions and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. When Yates and Winona celebrated their 10th anniversary, they threw a party that brought together everyone whose lives had touched theirs over the years. Samuel and Margaret and their children, neighbors from miles around, people from church and town, all came to celebrate with them. As Yates looked around at the crowd filling their home and yard, he was overwhelmed with gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought him here. "What are you thinking?" Winona asked, slipping her hand into his. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," he said honestly. "That if I could go back to that morning in Weaverville and make the choice again, I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even for the fast horse and open country," she teased gently. "Especially not for that. This is the open country right here. This farm, this family, this life we built together. This is all the freedom and adventure and future I could ever want, and it's better than anything I could have found alone." She kissed him softly, surrounded by family and friends, and he tasted salt on her lips and realized she was crying. "Happy tears," she assured him, smiling through them. "Just happy tears because I love you so much and I'm so grateful you stopped that day, that you chose us. I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life," he promised. "That's the easiest promise I'll ever make." The years continued to unfold, bringing both joys and challenges as all lives do. They weathered a terrible drought one year that nearly broke them, but pulled through with help from Samuel and their neighbors. They celebrated as Thomas courted and married a local girl named Sarah, sweet and hardworking, who fit into the family perfectly. They built a small house on the far corner of the property for the young couple, and when Thomas and Sarah's first child was born, a boy they named Yates, Yates held his grandson and felt the profound satisfaction of knowing his legacy would continue. Lily married a schoolteacher from Red Bluff, a thoughtful man who loved her intelligence and spirit, and they moved to Sacramento where both taught school. They visited often, bringing their own children in time, and the farmhouse was always full of noise and laughter during holidays. James took over the horse breeding operation that Yates had started years ago, expanding it with enthusiasm and skill. Thunder had long since passed away, honored in death as he had been in life, but his bloodline continued through careful breeding, and James built a reputation for raising the finest horses in the valley. Rose, true to her fierce spirit, became a rancher in her own right, partnering with a widow woman who owned property to the south. She never married, declaring she had no need for a husband when she could run a ranch better than any man, and Yates supported her completely, proud of her independence and strength. Through it all, Winona was his constant, his partner in everything. They grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the effects of years of hard work, but the love between them only deepened with time. She was still the first person he wanted to talk to each morning and the last person he wanted to see each night. After more than 30 years together, she could still make him laugh with a look and make his heart race with a kiss. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration that lasted 3 days. The farmhouse Yates had rebuilt all those years ago could barely contain everyone, but they made it work, people sleeping on every available surface and in the barn when necessary. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. On the last evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Yates and Winona sat on their porch in the rocking chairs Thomas had made for them years ago. The valley stretched out before them in the moonlight, peaceful and familiar, and Yates felt a deep contentment settle over him like a warm blanket. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd ridden on that day?" Winona asked, her hand finding his in the darkness. "If you'd followed your original plan?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But only in the way you wonder about roads not taken. I don't regret the choice I made. Not for a second." "What do you think you would have found? Land, maybe. Success, possibly. But not this. Not family and love and meaning. Those things, you can't find them by searching. They find you when you stop running long enough to let them catch up. You stopped for me," she said softly. "For us. Best decision I ever made." He squeezed her hand gently. "I had a fast horse and open country ahead of me, and I chose the slow wagon and you instead. And Winona, I would make that choice 1,000 times over. That slow wagon led me to everything that matters. It led me home." She moved from her chair to his lap, despite their age and the creaking protest of the rocking chair, and he held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I love you," she whispered. "From that first day in Weaverville to this moment and every day beyond, I love you with everything I am." "And I love you," he replied. "You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build instead of run. You gave me everything." They sat together as the moon crossed the sky. Two people who had found each other by chance and chosen each other by design, whose love had built something lasting and good. Around them, their family slept safe and warm. The land they had worked lay fertile and productive, and the future stretched ahead with promise for the generations that would follow. Yates thought about Thunder, long gone now but never forgotten, the horse that could have carried him anywhere but instead had brought him to exactly where he needed to be. He thought about that broken wagon wheel in Weaverville, the twist of fate that had delayed his departure just long enough to meet Winona. He thought about every choice and chance that had led him to this moment, this life, this love. And he was grateful for all of it, every single step of the journey that had brought him home. Years later, when Yates was 73 and Winona 72, they sat together on that same porch on a warm summer evening. Their great-grandchildren were playing in the yard, the newest generation of a family that now numbered more than 30 souls, all connected by blood and love, and the choices two people had made so many years ago. Yates had slowed down considerably, arthritis in his hands and back making the hard farm work impossible now. But he still walked the property daily, checking on things, offering advice to Thomas, who ran the farm now with his own sons. Winona's hair was pure white now, her face lined with age but still beautiful to him, still the face he wanted to see every morning. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the children play, "about that day in Weaverville, about how close we came to never meeting at all." "I've thought about that too," Yates admitted. "If I'd left an hour earlier, if you'd arrived an hour later, if someone else had offered to fix your wheel. But none of those things happened," she said firmly. "You were there, I was there, and you chose to help. That's what matters. Not the chances, but the choices." "I chose well," he said simply. "We both did." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of companionship, watching the sun set over the valley they had made their home. In the distance, Yates could see the fields of wheat waving golden in the evening breeze, could see the cattle grazing peacefully, could see the barns and houses that dotted the property, each one representing a new generation building their own futures on the foundation he and Winona had laid. "No regrets?" she asked, the question one they had asked each other many times over the years. "Not a single one," he confirmed, squeezing her hand. "You? Only that we don't have more years ahead of us, but I'm grateful for every year we've had. Me too." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their family called them in for dinner, voices overlapping in affection and gentle insistence that they come eat. Yates helped Winona to her feet, moving slowly but together, the way they had done everything for more than 40 years. Before they went inside, Winona turned to look back at the valley one more time. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing the slow wagon, for choosing love, for choosing us." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "It was never really a choice, my love. It was destiny. You were my destiny from the moment I saw you, and you were mine." They walked inside together, into the warmth and noise and love of their family, leaving behind the fast horse and open country that might have been, embracing instead the slow, steady journey they had taken together, the journey that had led them to everything that truly mattered. That night, lying in bed with Winona curled against his side as she had been for so many thousands of nights, Yates thought about the young man he had been, restless and searching, convinced that freedom lay in movement and escape. He thought about Thunder, stamping impatiently in that livery stable, ready to run, ready to carry him away from everything. And he thought about the choice he had made to stay, to help, to risk his heart on a widow with 2 children and a broken wagon. The choice that had seemed like a delay at the time but had actually been the beginning of everything good in his life. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, not sure if he was thanking God or fate or chance or Winona herself. Perhaps all of them. "Thank you for the slow wagon." Winona stirred beside him, half asleep but aware. "Always," she murmured, "always the slow wagon and you." He held her closer, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing, and let himself drift off to sleep, grateful beyond measure for every moment, every choice, every twist of fate that had brought him to this place, this woman, this life. In the end, Yates Emerson lived to be 87 years old, long enough to see his great-great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch the farm he had built expand and prosper beyond his wildest dreams, long enough to know without doubt that his life had mattered, that his choices had created something lasting and good. Winona lived to 86, sharp and loving until the end, surrounded by family who adored her. When she passed peacefully in her sleep one autumn night, Yates grieved but did not despair. They had been given more years together than many people ever dreamed of, and every one of those years had been a gift. He followed her 6 months later, on a spring morning when the valley was green and beautiful, and the wheat was just beginning to emerge from the soil. His children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around him, and his last words were simple and true. "I had a good life. I loved well and was loved in return. I chose the slow wagon and it led me to everything that mattered. No regrets, not a single one, and it was true." Yates Emerson, who had once owned the fastest horse in Shasta County, and had open country stretching before him full of possibilities and freedom, had chosen instead a broken wagon and a widow with 2 children, had chosen to stay instead of run, had chosen love instead of independence. And that choice had made all the difference. His legacy lived on in the family he had built, in the land he had worked, in the values he had taught, in the love he had given freely and received in return. The fast horse and open country had promised adventure and freedom, but the slow wagon had delivered something infinitely more valuable: home, family, purpose, and love that lasted not just a lifetime but generations. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.